So ride-hailing and gig economy titan Uber has gotten into a bit of hot water recently. Yesterday, one of their drivers, aka a quote-unquote partner, noticed something at a Rhode Island office of the company's. There was 2 washrooms in this office, both of them gender neutral, and both of them accessible. That's great to see, but at the end of the day, one of them was marked for employees and one of them was marked for partners. And that sort of distinction underlines the inherent classism and exclusion of Uber. On the one hand, you have the small proportion of people at Uber that the corporation actually recognizes as employees. And then the masses of workers, the people who actually make Uber what it is, and who are under any reasonable definition employees, have sort of been classified legally and, politically and culturally as partners / drivers / whatever you want to call them, but they're not really deemed part of the true Uber corporation, the true Uber family. And this is underlined not only in, legal discrimination, tools that the company uses to get around labor legislation and minimum wages and on and on and on, but very much culturally, as we see here, where they're not even allowed to use the same washrooms as the quote-unquote real employees. And this is really ugly to see. And Uber says this is a mistake, but the driver noted that these signs are not just, put up there on, pieces of loose leaf with markers. These signs were made specifically for these 2 doors to be paired there. This is not a mistake. And, whatever Uber wants to say in some of the reporting that's been done since then on this story, I don't buy it. Uber did this on purpose and are calling it a mistake because of the backlash that we've seen from this. And this is really deep classism. This isn't just a gaffe that, makes the company look bad. This is a manifestation of a belief that there are some people who just aren't plain good enough to use the same washroom as other people, or that there are some people that are quote unquote too good to use the same washroom as the quote-unquote rabble. And that really is this sort of tech bro aristocracy. On the one hand, tech companies like to have this cool, open, progressive image, the open workspaces, the collaborative nature. But all of these companies rely on a strict hierarchy, a strict caste system of workers between those that are recognized as part of the team and those that are in legal and cultural manners excluded, lower paid, given very little if any benefits, given little if any protections, given little if any security, and it underlines this really, really divisive and rather regressive system that underpins the labor regime in a lot of these tech / gig economy type workplaces. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez put it great when she said that, this is classism. You can look at this and say, this is classism. You could Google it. You could Siri it, as AOC suggests, and this would be the picture that comes up. This is segregation. When we think of segregation, we often think of segregation in purely racial terms, especially here in North America, where the history of black people especially being denied access to certain spaces, being given their own water fountain / washrooms / schools / swimming pools, etc., if they were given those things at all, and being barred from using the facilities that white people were allowed to use, which of course were often of much higher quality. But here we see that class can form a real matrix around which segregation happens. And not just in the sense that, you can't afford to go to this particular restaurant, aka it's segregated away from the poor. That's a big discussion to have. But even within workplaces, it sets up this idea that some people's washroom business is just plain more important than others, and you need to create, a barrier between the two. And I think this situation also shows the limitations of capitalist wokeism. Because here's the thing, these washrooms are gender neutral and accessible. And that's good to see. I'm not going to mock the fact that they have gender neutral washrooms. Gender neutral washrooms are incredibly important. People should feel comfortable going into a washroom of their choosing and should not feel that they have to misgender themselves to do something as basic as go to the washroom. Perfectly reasonable. But when you combine it with the classism, it really shows the sort of moral disconnect. In a move to make our society more equal, more tolerant, more welcoming, more understanding. We've maintained and in some cases increased barriers that divide people based on occupation or job status or income or class. It's sort of like those signs some businesses have on their windows where they're like, all genders, all races, all nationalities, all peoples welcome. And right next to it, it'll say, washrooms for customers only, which is to basically say that everyone is welcome here except for the poor, except for the homeless. And that's basically the message of 2019 woke neoliberalism. And so I just wanted to highlight this story because I want people to realize that a lot of these tech companies that trade on an image of progressivism and of choice and of welcoming and of flexibility are at their core based on rigid hierarchies that discriminate against the poor and the working class. People need to see this to realize that when these companies operate, they do not operate in the interests of working people. They never will. And the only way we can even force them to move in the right direction is through legislation that challenges their misclassification of workers. And of course, through the broad-based unionization of all workers in the tech and gig economy, whether they're contract workers or whether they're formalized employees. That's the only path forward.